All right, so start to bring it back up front. So let's bring it back together. I'll get a little bit louder here. Thank you. Okay. We love everyone together, and we love the networks that come out of this. So we appreciate you participating. We're going to go through some announcements, some advocacy, some events. Like I said, if you have anything you want to share at any point, please put your hand up and I'll call on you. You can tell us about what you got in the works and we can share it with the group here. To start off, George, do you want to come up and go through a few things?
George Claflin, one of the two vice chairs of DAG. Three things quickly noted. This is the 1000 block of Market Street. The south side is the focus of the frame, and that has now, most of those buildings have been acquired by Harris Blitzer. So we're not done with them yet. There'll be participants in whatever happens, at least in the beginning. So that's very interesting. There's certainly a model for what can happen on Market East, just to the right there in the 1100 block of what National Development did, which is probably the most successful thing on Market East in many years. There's also a looming vacant site a block and a half to the left, which has been vacant for about 40 years. The old Gimbel site between 8th and 9th Street. So DAG is still engaged in Market Street. We've participated in Charette's. We're aware of Chinatown's efforts, and we're aware of the group that was called No Arena Wash Square West has now repositioned itself with a new name as a continuing community organization. But that, I'm just going to keep that brief. So if we could go to the. You've got control. Press the arrow on the. Oh, just hit the arrow. Oh, sorry.
This one.
Oh, this one. There, that one. Okay. We're all very sad about this. I thought that it would be appropriate. This is an unusual photograph taken from the building adjacent to the Art Alliance. That is the ruins of the top floor and the attic area. And I think if I go to the next one, Jelani, it'll play the film. Okay. It's a very short film. Oops. Oh. There we go. I don't know if I have to do something to make it play now. There we go. In that video, I was a little bit worried because I saw fire trucks, but I didn't see any water being poured on the fire. And of course, the firemen were not privileged to have this vision from the adjacent building unless they had somebody up observing. But I just wanted to mention that. That's it. So the third thing has no slide, but many of you have some connection to Temple University and to the Temple Architecture Program. And I just want to report that one of the founders of that program, Bridget Knowles, who was the Senior Associate Dean at Tyler School of Art and Architecture for quite a few years, and has passed away. And there's no news yet as far as any memorial service and so forth, but you will be seeing an obituary within the next few weeks. Thank you.
Thanks, George. Open invitation is still out there if anyone has anything they want to share with us. A few other things to talk about specifically on Market East. The folks involved in the Wanamaker's project have successfully pulled their zoning permits, so it's good to see some momentum there. Mixed use, lots of apartments, still figuring out the retail piece of it on the ground floor, but good progress nonetheless. Right, we're early days with those zoning documents. There's still a lot of review and process to go with that. Elsewhere, as George mentioned, we have been in touch with Comcast Spectacor about the stadium district, about their partnership with Harris Blitzer, and are continuing to needle them to try and figure out what's going on with their acquisitions, and we'll report back as we learn more. And as George mentioned, there was a wonderful event here on June 23rd called the People's Vision for Market East. I'm reminded, as many of us are, of my predecessor, Elise Vider, and her passion for having communities be educated and prepared to meet development pressure and respond appropriately to it. So to have that community so well organized, so well focused, and actually, my remarks at the event were focused on the question, if not this, then what? Because we were lobbed that attacking question all the time throughout the process as if it was a zero-sum game. And it was great to see that team really pick up that ball and run with it and propose a lot of things that are common sense, viable commercial opportunities to help continue to improve the fashion district and make positive change in that community that also could serve a developer on that site. So that was a really interesting program. They're continuing to develop their vision and their approach to that. So there'll be more to come on that front as well. The last thing I wanted to remark on, we've had our friends from Scout in here talking about their acquisition of Hamilton and Furness Hall. If you haven't been to Frankie Summer Club, they've already been at work. They've got a great pop-up there. You enter off the back off of 15th Street, and it's a really lovely intervention and way to start welcoming people to that space after the celebration of life of the building. So go check it out. It's very cool. It's a lot of fun. Usually I stand up here and just sort of yell, fund SEPTA, save SEPTA. So we wanted to do a little more with that this month rather than just yell it the same way I have in the past. So to my left, there's some nice SEPTA swag that was acquired at the SEPTA store here. So I have a few questions I'm going to throw out, and we'll give out some cool SEPTA gear, and we'll go from there. So raise your hand if you know what year SEPTA was formed. Ben. I'm going to give it to you. It's technically 63, but no, you take that pint glass home with you. All right. So this one, I say if you can get within 10 on this, I'll take it. How many stations are in the SEPTA system? Anyone want to wager a guess? Total stations. Well, not bus stations yet. Sorry, physical rail stations. I apologize. Yes. All right. So that takes that number considerably down. Split the difference between there. Why don't we send a couple of those pairs of glasses, one that way and one into the back there. The answer is 290. So most people would probably guess that New York has the largest rapid transit system. Where does SEPTA rank in the country? Marcus in the back, 6th. I'm gonna take him that little journal there. All right. So you got DC, got North Jersey, there's where else? Boston, Boston's in there, Chicago. Yeah. So let's see, where should we go from here? David Brownlee, one of our resident experts, threw a bunch of questions on here. And again, within 10 years, I'll take on this one. When were the Philadelphia streetcars electrified? 05's the closest. Let's go there with the water bottle there. The answer was 1894. All right, so much more stuff do we have? This one I'm actually going to need a hand. So can someone name the counties, the 5 counties that make up SEPTA?
Philadelphia, Bucks, Delaware, Chester, and
Send him a tea towel. All right, let's see what else we have on here. Here's a good question. Again, within 10 years, we'll take. When did trolley service begin between Center City and West Philadelphia? No, you're out. You're out. I've heard enough from you. It's 1858, so I think that's close enough. You pick one. So then I'll wrap up here. We actually had purchased this fancy light blue Market Frankfurt line hat for our speaker tonight, but he brought his own light blue hat. So that's for you, Joe. So the last one, well, I'll ask you, when were who benefits from SEPTA being fully funded? Over there. So in all seriousness, we did reach out to State Senator Saval's office, Councilmember Gauthier's office to ask what they wanted us to do, where we can have the most impact. So from that, they said to focus on the State House and the governor, obviously. They need to hold the line on the floor, particularly calling House leadership, which is McClinton, Bradford, and Harris. Tell them the importance of SEPTA, how you personally rely on it, and that any SEPTA cut is not acceptable. They need to hold the line there. You can always get involved with Transit Forward Philly, which is transitforwardphilly.org. And if you work for a decent size employer, ask them to publicly affirm their support for SEPTA. That goes a long way. So those were 3 of the big things they told us that could be done. So please do what you can, and the fight continues. I will wrap up with a few events, and then we'll get into our program. We'll be back here on Thursday, August 14th with the Friends of the Rail Park. They have access to the next piece of their project. They're getting into some really interesting stuff that focus on both on design and public space, but also community development, and they're linking it together in sort of one really interesting plan. So they'll be here to present that with a group of collaborators and experts. And then Tuesday, September 23rd, Councilman Squilla will be here to talk. We're going to do a one-on-one with him, talk about all the things going on. Oh, hey, Rebecca. There's our presenter for August in the back. You can wave. So Councilman Squilla will be here September 23rd. And then in October, we're still working out a date. That will be a virtual date, but we'll be talking to Joe Forkin from DRWC, giving an update on the Delaware River and all the things going on there, where they are in progress, what new things can we expect, and that should be a really good program. No hands the whole time. No one has anything they want to share with the group? Stand up.
I don't know if it was mentioned last month, but going to Leavenworth Market, Dawes Market, Sanford Street, CMX 4 and 5, no longer a lot of other there is
Thank you for that. Last chance. So talking about the fact that CMX 4 and CMX 5 zonings now don't have parking requirements, and the improvement that will make in terms of helping projects to pencil and be more viable going forward. So it is a pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight, Joe Sirnick, President and CEO to Schuylkill River Development Corporation. He has been at DAG in the past, though it was a few years back, and we're really thrilled to have him here. For those who don't know SRDC, they are the lead agency for the redevelopment of the tidal Schuylkill River. And they're working with public and private agencies, institutions, and corporations to revitalize and redevelop the lower Schuylkill River. Joe spent quite a long time in the city of Philadelphia, where he's been the chief engineer and a surveyor. He's been all over the city, knows how to get things done. So we're really excited to have him here to join us to tell us about what's been going on and what the plans are for the future. So please join me in welcoming Joe Cernak.
So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I have a lot of slides. Our mode is, pictures worth 1,000 words, and you're going to get quite a few thousand words tonight. But and it was really hard to try to cull down the number of pictures because they're all so great. So what I intend to do is to show you what's happened over the last 20 years. I'm sure most of you know it. I can't imagine there's anybody in this room that has been on the Schuylkill Trail at least once. But I'm going to assume that maybe there is one person in there, and we'll. Oops. Schuylkill Banks is the branding that we've given to the Schuylkill River Trail in the last 8 miles of the river, the tidal part of the Schuylkill River. Some people don't know the Schuylkill River is tidal. There's a 5 or 6 foot variation in tide. And that makes everything we do out there on the river more complicated. This is what the river looked like in 1924. This thing is moving by itself now, so. I think we have it on a timer. Will you get it back to where I see the next slide coming, the previous slide?
Yeah.
So just looking at, remember that old picture, 1924, you could not see the river, even if you lived in the neighborhood. The only way you could see the river was if you worked in one of those companies were out there. And even then, can you imagine what the river was like in terms of pollution? It was, I can only imagine what it would be. So it's interesting. The first 4 lines of that slide say the Schuylkill Banks abused, which tells me 2 things. Even in 1924, people knew they weren't doing the right thing by the river. That's number 1. And the second thing is Schuylkill Banks end up being coincidentally our logo, which I don't know what that says. So this is that roughly same stretch of the river today. It's a little different vantage point. It says 2015 there because the FMC building isn't there. But it's a very different river, isn't it? And in fact, it's a very different Philadelphia. So how do we get from the 1924 slide to the 2015 slide? Well, the first thing is 90 years passed. So a lot of things can happen in 90 years. But also, the concept of a river trail goes back ages. I've heard at least 10 different stories of where it first started, and they're all probably partly true, but they go back decades and decades. In 1992, there was an organization called the Schuylkill River Development Council, SRDC. It was organized to try to first fix up a little pocket park around 25th and Spruce Street, and they did such a good job there. They said, well, why don't we take on this whole riverfront? Because why not? So that was mostly a community-based organization, and they did advocacy. And that advocacy, they did a really good job. They were going to government. They were getting government to clean up the area. And they did that for 10 years. And at the end of 10 years, and John Randolph is here, and he'll correct me if I say something wrong, but at the end of 10 years, the city said, look, you're coming at us all the time. You have a great vision for the river, but you've got to have some skin in the game. You've got to help us do what you wanted to do. So the city sort of forced the Schuylkill River Development Council to reorganize as the Schuylkill River Development Corporation, which was more of a business-based organization with some kind of more of a paid staff and a lot of businesses and companies that could bring resources to the thing. At that time, around that time, there were at least 2, maybe more, planning studies initiated. The one on the right there was issued by the Schuylkill River Development Council. The one on the left there was issued in 2003 by the Schuylkill River Development Corporation. So the only thing that changed when they went from the community-based organization to the thing, it's the same organization, they just slightly modified the name, but it's still SRDC. So this is my favorite picture of the trail. Whenever I'm putting together PowerPoint or somebody's helping me, I say, put my favorite picture in there. And I like the blue sky and I like the art museum in the distance. But if you look closely there's one single bicyclist there in that slide coming towards us. I would argue you would have a very difficult time getting this photograph today, because what you would see out there mostly is something like this. Lots more people out on the trail than one single bicyclist on a nice day. People use it in the rain. People use it in the snow. I imagine a lot of people in this group will remember the whole issue of the railroad. The railroad, when the trail was built, the railroad came and actually sued the city, trying to close off the entrance to the trail at Locust Street and Ray Street. And the city, to their credit, said, the heck, we just built a trail. We're not closing it off. It was in federal court. It was Judge Kaufman. And luckily, the judge, on the very first day, he said, I don't really get what you're saying, railroad. You're bringing this court case, but I drive into work every day and I go over a couple of railroad grade crossings. It's in my car, it's not as unsafe as you're thinking it is. So the railroad got a little nervous that they were going to lose the lawsuit that they had brought. So a compromise was reached. And the 2 crossings, Race and Locust Street, had the gates that you all know there that close automatically. But also as part of that agreement, they would build a pedestrian bridge. Now you would think that would be an easy sell. That was not an easy sell. In fact, we got the job somehow of moving that along. The city was smarter than us there, I guess. And in fact, we got sued by the neighbors to stop this. So in any event, it finally got done. And I think everybody is pretty happy with that. The dog park is way better than it was before. The gardens were kept in place. And the bowl area, which some people thought was in jeopardy, hasn't changed at all. If you go downriver further, there's the Schuylkill Banks Boardwalk. This was done out of necessity. There wasn't enough room on land to build a trail on land. So at some point, somebody said, well, why don't you build a structure out over the river? You could call it a boardwalk and it would be great. And we were told by people who are very knowledgeable, don't even think about it. You could never afford it and you could never, ever get permitting for it. So last October was the 10th anniversary of the boardwalk. So obviously both those things are not correct. This is a picture of the boardwalk from the South Street Bridge. And I don't know if you're all knowledgeable people. This is the South Street photo of Center City is now the go-to photograph of the city. It used to be Belmont Plateau, but there's such a great view of the skyline there that it's just great. And lucky for us, the boardwalk just happens to be right in the middle of it. If you turn around there and go south, there's a section down there called South to Christian Street. That's South Street to Christian Street. This is a section of trail. It's really nice. It's planted differently. It's more of a meadow mix. Up until recently, 2 months ago, we didn't get a huge amount of traffic because it was a dead end right at Christian Street. But it's a very nice section of trail. I'm going to jump over a section here. And I'm going to go down to the other side of 34th Street, where there's a section of trail called Grace Ferry Crescent. Grace Ferry, because that's the neighborhood you're in. Crescent, because there's a big curve in the river to the left. This is a really beautiful trail, but it's a neighborhood park. It doesn't go anywhere. It didn't go anywhere to the north, and it wasn't connected very well to the south. So the neighbors loved it, but we need to it's supposed to be a trail. It's supposed to be for everybody. So with that, we then always wanted to cross over the river, because we knew we could not continue down on the east side of the river, because while this was going on, Sunoco was still operating a refinery down there, and then Philadelphia Energy Solutions took that over. We knew we could never get a trail through a refinery. Oil and water, those things really don't mix. So we looked at other ways of doing it, and we wanted to cross around at Grace Ferry Avenue. And if you look at Grace Ferry Avenue there, the first thought was, well, we use the Grace Ferry Avenue Bridge to cross over the river. But if you know that bridge, it's very, very high up in the air. It's not pedestrian friendly. It's certainly not bicycle friendly. So the new idea, not so new anymore, was to take this old abandoned railroad swing bridge and turn it into, use it for the trail crossing. Trains stopped running on this in somewhere in the 1980s. We're not sure when, but here's a picture of the rails, 2 sets of rails, and you can see a fairly good sized tree growing up from between the rails. So you can, obviously it was a long time ago. So we had a design done, went through a lot of iterations, but this is what it ended up looking like in a rendering. So on the near side, towards the bottom of the screen, is the Grace Ferry Crescent, which opened in 2012. And on the other side is what turned out to be the Bartram's Mile, which opened in 2017. This project was put out for bid in 2018. It isn't done yet. The contractor walked off the job. There was a dispute with the city. He was off the job for a long time. But before he left, he got rid of, and the idea was, we're going to get rid of the old truss. It's too heavy, it's too old, and we're going to put a newer, lighter truss in there, and we're going to keep it as a movable bridge. That wasn't our first choice. We wanted to have a fixed bridge and raise it up higher, but the Coast Guard put the kibosh on that. So Mayor Nutter, that's how far this goes back, said, screw this, we'll put back a movable bridge, which did not put me in a good spot with my colleagues at the Streets Department, because they hated that idea. But that was the plan, and that's what you see in the rendering there. So here's what it looked like before the contractor walked off the job. And the city's handling this. We gave them a really hard thing to deal with, but they've done a wonderful job. The good news is steel started to arrive on site within the last 2 weeks. Iron workers are out there putting that steel together, and I am told that next week, these sections here will be put on a barge and be taken out to the pedestal and starting to be erected. And if that happens, and if everything else goes well, this will be open by the end of the calendar year. Now, if everything goes well in this job, it will be the first time. So we'll see what happens, but let's hope for the best. Let's hope that in November or December, we have a real picture showing what this rendering shows. And that's really important, because that gets you from the east side of the river to the west side of the river and vice versa. So it gets a lot more traffic on the trail, and it will connect the people in Southwest Philadelphia to Center City. And that's critical, of course, because that's where the restaurants are, that's where the theaters are, that's where some schools are, but most importantly, that's where the jobs are. So that connection is really important to us. Once you cross over the river there, you come to a section of the trail called the Bartram's Mile. It's about a mile long, and it goes through Bartram's Garden. This opened, as I say, in 2017. Again, it's a neighborhood park. It's not connected yet to the north. It's not connected very good to the south, but it's a beautiful section of trail. Here, this is what it looks like. And you know, we're trying. Once you get that swing bridge connected, this trail gets a lot more traffic on it. Now, if you were to walk down that trail, you would walk past a bunch of old derelict piers, mostly petroleum piers. They're out in the river. They're rotting. They're not being used. Fishermen are going out there on some of them and taking a life in their hands, walking out there. We've taken a couple of those piers and we've turned them into a fishing pier. We thought on the one you just saw that we could use certain elements of the foundation in there. When we get in there, we almost couldn't use anything. It was almost completely rebuilt. But those piers have something very important. They have a permit. And for some reason, which I do not understand, and maybe you folks do, it is immensely easier to revise a permit or update a permit than it is to come in with a new permit. So that permit is really valuable. It establishes the fact that there's something there and you're fixing it. It sort of makes it a maintenance project in a way, although this was way more than maintenance. So if you go down the end of the Bartram's Trail, you would come at one time to 56th Street, this wonderful pergola and plaza there, beautiful views of the city. And for a while, that's where the trail ended, because we're building this trail as land and money becomes available. So it ended at 56th Street for 4 years, and until we got some money to do something different. And that to extend it further south. So this is what it looks like going further south. It goes, there's a section of trail right along the river. This is old abandoned industrial land, but it wasn't too bad. And in fact, at the northern end of this is what it looked like. And you don't need a great imagination, I think, to see a trail being built right through there, and the river's right on to the right there. When you got further down, it did get a little more gnarly. There was a lot of invasive plants. There's a lot of what some people call Philadelphia fill, which is old rubble that is buried down there from demolition sites, but still pretty good. So that trail got under construction. Here it is, almost a picture of it almost done. Here's a picture of a fishing platform that we built there, $1 million. This fishing is really huge in this area. Now, there's a lot of people out there because it's opening day, and just to the right there, we're giving out free donuts. So a lot of people there. But if you were to walk south from there, you just follow the terrain. It's rolling terrain. And when you get to the end there, you come to this wonderful overlook that we're able to build there. And right beyond that, the trail ends there today. And that's where it ends today. So this overlook has amazing views of the city skyline. And by the way, almost the whole trail has great views of the skyline. So that was exciting to get that done. But again, it's a neighborhood park. It's not connected to the south. It's not well connected to the north. So now let's jump back to the section that we skipped over, because that's the star of the show, I think. So this is a section of the trail that we call Christian to Crescent. Christian Street extended to the Grays Ferry Crescent. This is kind of an industrial area there. This is an aerial shot. You'll see a lot of oil tanks there. It's a complicated section there. There's a lot going on. There's an old, let's see here. There's an old abandoned coal crane here that used to take coal from the river and take it into the power plant. There's the East Side Railroad that's here. There's an Arsenal Bridge, which is an active CSX railroad bridge. There's some high voltage lines there that follow the railroad, take advantage of the railroad right of way, but you got to keep away from those. You've got the expressway bridge there that you've got to go. So you got to go under, probably under the Arsenal Bridge and under the expressway bridge. This is Interstate 76. I know some of you call it the Schuylkill Expressway. We'd like you to stop doing that. Okay. If you don't know where this is, and you probably don't because you can't really see this from anywhere, it's right in back of the shopping center on Grays Ferry Avenue, which is down here, or directly across the river from Penn's baseball field. So again, a lot of complications. How are we going to get a trail through here? We really didn't want to go out over the river if we didn't have to, but maybe we'd have to. So this is a plan view of the alignment. And this is the alignment that we were able to work through, wiggle it through here. And the color coding here is anything that's in yellow is trail that was able to be built on grade, on land. Anything that was orange is trail that was going to have to be built on structure. And we were going to have to come out over the river at least a little bit. So the question was, okay, well, we have a lot of structure, but what will that structure look like? What would that structure look like? And we said, well, we know we have the boardwalk, and we built the boardwalk, and that's just pre-stressed concrete beams on caissons. Those caissons go down into the riverbed, and they actually go down in the rock. And we knew we could build that, but so we looked at that. But we thought, you know, this thing is high up in the air now because they had to get up to get over that pier, right? And we thought, well, if we do that, you're going to have these piers every 60 feet. And the big concrete piers, it's going to look like a concrete forest of piers. And it's just not going to look good. It'll work, but it isn't going to look good. Also, it's going to be expensive because these piers are all built on drilled shafts or caissons. And if you look at the boardwalk, this is a shot of the boardwalk. That's the way that's built. But the boardwalk sits down low in the river. And if you count all those piers going in there, there's like 23 of them in this picture. But it doesn't bother me because you hardly see it from anywhere. And second of all, it's not that concrete forest. But these would be, because they would be much higher, or maybe they would be. So we looked at a steel girder. Now that lets you do a longer span, and therefore you have less columns, but you still had a lot of columns. So we said, we're not crazy about that either. So we looked at this and we said, all right, we've got the dark orange, which is the rising up on both sides, and then the light orange. Once we get up over the high up, we want it to stay up, because at the beginning of this project, there was an idea to take a spur over the railroad track and back into the neighborhood. And for a bunch of reasons, that got deferred. We're actually starting to relook at that again. And we thought, is there something we can do on this flat part of the land, of the structure here, that would make sense? And we thought, well, how do you figure that out? Well, you guys all know, you do a study. So we did this bridge study, and we looked at different bridge types for a span of 650 feet. And the ones that came out ahead, or at least was, well, we looked at a cable stay bridge in the upper left. We looked at a tide arch, upper right. We looked at something called an extra dose bridge, which is a kind of bridge I had never heard of, but it's sort of a mixture between a cable stay bridge and a pre-stressed box girder. And we even looked at a suspension bridge. So when we looked at those things, we looked at cost, we looked at appearances, we looked at how many penetrations they were going to make into the water, because the more penetrations you make into the water, the more difficult the permitting becomes. Also, it's expensive. So the suspension bridge just sort of eliminated itself. It's not long enough for a suspension bridge. But the other three would work. But when the committee that was looking at that looked at that, nobody really liked the tide arch. I don't know why, they didn't like the tide arch. But they did like the cable stay bridge, and they did like the extra dose bridge. But there's a lot of different ways you can configure a cable stay bridge. So we need another study. So we looked at 6 structures there. 4 of them were cable stay bridges, and 2 of them, the 2 on the right, were extra dose bridges. They also have cables, but their supports are much stronger, and they're putting forces on the deck in a different way. The cable stay bridge is sort of holding it up like suspenders. On the extra dose bridge, it's sort of pulling it, it's pre-stressing it, or maybe post-stressing it. So we looked at this thing. One had just one big pier going along the top. The second one had 2 piers, and the deck sort of wrapped itself around in back of the first pylon and in front of the second one. So there was this sinuous curve there. Lower left, this was a different cable stay bridge, 1 pylon, but this one had two planes of thing. I'll show you that in a minute. And then the one in the middle and the bottom is 2 columns, cable stay bridge with a weave design. And then we looked at the 2 extra dose ones. The one in the lower right, everybody thought you guys are trying too hard to be cute. You're just trying too hard. Good for you, but we're not doing that. The one in the upper right, it's funny. A lot of people were pushing for that. And the people that were pushing for that, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying, it's kind of like the city people, because they've been saying, it's got to be functional, but it's got to be the least expensive thing you can build out there that does the job, because that's what engineers do. It's cost benefit analysis. You just can't, can't look nice. And I'm an engineer, and I've been completely run. And he said, well, why can't it look nice? Wouldn't that be okay too? So, but again, so you look at those things. Okay. Let's see. I think I'm frozen up here. I might need some help. Yeah. Okay. So these are the different kind of configurations you can have with the cables when the cables stay bridged. You can have the fan thing at the top where they're all connected at the top and they fan out. You can have the hawk one, which is the bottom where they sort of more or less parallel, and then you have combinations in between. You can also have these cables come down in two planes where they attach to the outside of the deck, or you can have them come down in a center span where they connect in the middle of the deck. Now, when you do that, you don't have as good rigidity as you do with the double span. So in order to do that, you've got to beef up the deck, make the deck a little beefier so it adds to that stability. So we went back and we looked at the alternatives. I will tell you that for a long time, the leader in the clubhouse was the second one in from the top. And then at some point, and I'm not even sure how this happened, somebody said, no, let's do with number 4 there, the one in the middle. We like the fact that there's one plane. Let me go back from me. I should have, when you do the single plane, you see where the cable's coming down there in the middle, sort of bluish, I guess. That sort of automatically defines 2 lanes of travel. You sort of have a southbound lane and a northbound lane, or you can have a lane that is bicycles and a lane that is pedestrians, but it sort of automatically separates those 2 things. And people like that. So we end up picking that one. And then we took that in a little more refined design. This is what the rendering looked like. This is how it would look like in a rendering in use. And then it also could be architecturally lit at night or accent lighting at night. So we like that. So that went out to bid. This is the approach work. It's just, single caisson, pier cap, pre-stressed concrete beams. This is the reinforcing steel. This is epoxy coated steel. All of the concrete had to be brought on barges on these hoppers. So they would take a truck downriver, they fill up 2 of these hoppers, and then they would move as fast as they could because they didn't want us to set up in the hopper, and they would get and dump the thing. It was really hard to do, and it took a lot of people to do it. Everybody had to be out on site that they needed for this. This is how that approach ended up. And I want to point out to you here the very fancy railings there. This is stainless steel 316. When one of the estimators were looking at that at the beginning, he looked at that and he said, ooh, the good stuff. So we're doing that because we're in a marine environment and we're doing this, but the city's going to own the trail. And the city said to us, please don't build us something so fancy that we can never maintain it because you're not doing us any favors. And we said, look, we've got to be out in the river, over the river. We've got to have, certain kinds of things, but we'll do everything possible to make the maintenance of this as good as possible. If we can get everything in the last 75 years, would you be good? And everybody said, yeah, that would be good. So here's the construction starting on the pylons. These are the caissons going on, a cofferdam being put around them to pump out all the water. Here's the caissons under construction. There's 9 of them for each tower. Here's the reinforcing steel. Look at how much steel there. You wonder how they can get the concrete in there, don't you? You look around at how many people are working on this thing. They're finishing this up here. Here's the tower starting to go up. Here's the tower getting further up. The picture on the right here, if you look at that, there are some piping in here. This is plastic piping that they can pump either hot water or cold water in there. So if it's summertime and you want to keep the heat of hydration down, you can pump cold water in there. And if you're doing cold weather concreting, you could put hot water in there and it changes the temperature. So kind of complicated. Here's the attachments going up there, the cable attachments. When you bring these beams in, you got to set them somewhere. And you don't attach the cables right away. So you had to put these temporary structures in there, which is what that rusty color steel is. So this is a support for these beams. This photo is a little bit out of sequence because the beams were already up, but I wanted to show you the contractor, he built himself this boardwalk so that everything he did not have to be done from the water. He was able to get heavy equipment out on there. I think this idea is what got him the job. So here come the beams. These are big, heavy beams, 135 tons. They were manufactured up in a plant in Albany. They were brought down the Hudson River, down along the Jersey coast, up Delaware Bay, Delaware River, Schuylkill River. And then we were told, you got to be really careful. These are very, very heavy beams. if you have a crane on a barge and they make a mistake, it could fall over. The crane could be in the river. The beam could be in the river. You got yourself a mess. People tried to talk us into going to steel instead of concrete. That would have been lighter. But we're saying, no, we're trying to make it less maintenance for the city, and concrete is less maintenance than steel. So again, we were getting some of these comments from a peer review consultant whose job was to look at what you got and make comments. And he was saying, I think you're making a mistake. There's only 5 cranes in the country that can do this, and they're all over the country, and you'll never get one. So we said, well, we're doing it. So this contractor, by the way, was fabulous. So he found this crane that was in the Bahamas, and he's bringing this crane up from the Bahamas to install these things. And we're thinking this is going to be the biggest crane you've ever seen, a behemoth. And we're waiting for it to come up the river. It took like 2 weeks to get up from the Bahamas. This is what it was. And we said, I think you sent the wrong piece of equipment there. Well, it wasn't the wrong piece of equipment. It was exactly the right piece of equipment. It picked these things up, and we watched them over there, plopped it on. The first beam was 27 minutes, which is pretty darn fast. And he got faster as he went on. As he did them, he got more comfortable with doing it. So again, the contractor, he went and found the right piece of equipment. He had to go to the Bahamas to get it. Probably cost him a fortune, but he had it there. So here it is, lifting these things in there. When you have these kind of structures, you can get some movement in there. That's okay. That's normal. But we decided to spend some extra money and put these dampers in there. So these dampers sort of counteract any movement. So if the structure wants to swing to the left, somehow this pushes it back to the right. This is the stainless steel in the deck. First time in my 50-some-year career, we use stainless steel reinforcing bars. PennDOT put the kibosh on that. They said, absolutely, you can't use that. It's like the Lexus thing. You're going crazy, SRD. So you're going crazy. So we actually said, look, how about we do this? How about we bid it as an alternate? We'll design it this way, but the contractor can bid it using epoxy. So PennDOT said, that's fine, because we're absolutely sure everybody's going to bid it as epoxy coated, which would be less money. 8 bidders, 7 of them bid epoxy, but the low bidder bid this. And that's the only bid that counts, So we've got stainless steel thing there. Oh, I'm stuck again, guys. Eli, I don't know what you did last time, but show me now.
I think you had to right click and then pop that up.
Okay.
So
here they are finishing some concrete. Again, you see how many people out there, they're all brought out there, by bar. So they have everybody they're going to need for this operation has to be out there. They can't say, hey, where's Louis? Louis on land. Louis got to be out on the site there. Here they are starting to put the cables up. They attach the cables at the bottom, they attach the cables at the top, and then they tension those cables. And as they tension those cables, it lifts it up about 1 inch off of those temporary supports, which are on jacks, and then they can pull those supports out. So here's the final trail alignment in there. Not sure why I have that in there. I think I had it for a reason. Yes. You remember, that was the alignment there. But when you got to the far end there, we had to get across 34th Street. And lucky for us, there was an old abandoned railroad underpass there. The railroad was abandoned, but the bridge was there. And this is what the bridge looked like. Now, in this photograph, it doesn't look too bad, but it actually was bad. This is what it looked like underneath. And PennDOT had a plan to remove this bridge, fill it in, and get rid of a bridge and make it just a regular roadway section. We went to PennDOT. I had to cry in public, but I asked them if they would please keep it open. And PennDOT said, look, we can do better than keeping it open for you. We can actually reconstruct it. So as part of the big project, but at PennDOT's cost, they took these arches that you see there, 2 sections, slid one end from each side. And then once they did that, they demolished the bridge up top and around it. The graffiti people found out where this was happening, by the way. But this is what this thing looks like today, looking in the 2 directions. So that was super, super fortunate and super, super great by PennDOT. So again, Here's a rendering of what this bridge looks like, but you know what? We don't need to show you a rendering anymore because we can show you the actual photographs. So as all of you probably know, yeah. May 17th, great day. We have some great photographs. What we always do is we have a lot of donors to our organization. So a couple of days before the opening, we give our donors a chance to come and walk on the bridge, sort of get a sneak peek of the bridge. So I think most of you will know Bob Thomas on the right. He's the trail guru in this area for sure. He knows everything there is to know about trails. And over on the left is Inga Saffron and Gardner Cadwallader. Lucky for us, Inga was coming as a donor, not in her professional capacity because she can be tough. This is opening day. This is the ribbon cutting. We get out there. We realize our insurance company said, look, you're doing something dangerous. You've got these big scissors there. We really don't want you to do this. We want you to have somebody, a safety officer overseeing the thing. So we got one. Here he comes. So he oversaw the cutting. Everything went great. And he sort of led everybody over the bridge. And everybody followed. And it was a great day. It was a great day. So the bridge looks really good. It's got an immense number of people down on the lower end of the trail on the Grace Ferry Crescent. Remember, that was a neighborhood park. Well, now there's a whole lot of people coming from the north down there. And I'm sure there's just as many people coming from the south going north. Grady stayed around and took pictures. This is Danielle in our office. So Grady made a friend. And oh, look, Grady made another friend. Most of you know that's Council President Kenyatta Johnson. The fireboat got involved. So a great day. It's open. I was down there this morning. People are using it. John Randolph said he was down there this morning. People are using it. So now I just want to tell you about the last project. I know I'm going a little long, but this is exciting. So we want to go down and extend the trail southward from where the overlook is. So on this slide, we built what was in yellow, but it's a dead end. We want to take that to Passyunk Avenue because when it's a dead end trail, it's just a recreational trail. You run or you bike out, you hit the fence, you turn around and come back. If you can get to Passyunk Avenue, you can get to South Philly or Southwest Philadelphia. So all we're trying to do is just build a trail along the river. It's all active industry there. It's not the most pleasant industry there. There's a soil remediation plant. There's a concrete plant. There's a whole bunch of junk car operations there. There's some car repair. There's Jerry's Corner, if some of you might know what that is. It's sort of a funny flea market. That green line is the trail going under there. It goes to the Hilco property. This is what it looks like if you stood on that overlook and look down there. It looks like a green ribbon down there. It looks good, but it's not so good. All these junk cars are there, and some of them are falling down the river, almost into the river, falling down the hill, almost into the river. But there are some things there. This is the guy from the auto body plant. He's complaining. He says, you build a trail here, I'll lose my fishing spot. And we said, no, you'll just have to share your fishing spot with a whole bunch of other people. But look at the view out there. And if you sneak out a little bit, you get tremendous views of the city skyline. And then you get to the end, which is the Hilco property. This is what it looks like today. This is, we think, not that polluted. Neither Sunoco or Philadelphia Energy Solutions really developed this part of the land. We need to do some testing. Hilco's been a little bit of a pain in the neck with regard to that, but keep your fingers crossed that we can get down there. And then everything I've talked to you about so far is capital projects, because this is the design advocacy group, and I think capital projects is mostly what you're looking at. But our organization does a lot of maintaining of Schuylkill Banks. We do almost all of it. We have a couple volunteers in the group here who are part of that group. We have one maintenance man for 4 miles of trail, but he has a lot of volunteers who are very faithful and very talented. And then, of course, we have our programming. We have kayak tours, riverboat tours, movie nights. Tomorrow's another movie night. We've had 3 of them scheduled so far this year. 2 have been rained out, so we're hoping for no rain tomorrow. And then that last picture is Fish Fest. And then I think that's it. So thank you. So I don't know how we're doing for time, but I'll take questions. I'm good for questions.
We've
if you're
got
good.
time.
Okay.
Before we get into it, if you've been to DAG before, we may have been complaining about something that was not happening. So it's wonderful to have a group here that's just getting things done over and over again. So thank you for sharing with us.
It's 20 years, Eli, though. It's 20 years. Yeah, it's not, it doesn't
It's
happen
consistent progress.
Yep.
Dane.
One thing that when I was walking the trail, I saw some great industrial relics, like an old crane that had been sort of decorated a little bit, I think. And it speaks so much about what Philadelphia used to be as an industrial giant. And I hope that somehow that bit of interpretation can be included. So we're not just looking at green space and structure, but there's some interesting history there as well.
So
And
at one point,
place to
Pico
tell us.
said to us, you guys can remove that crane if you want. And we said, well, why would we be spending $1 million to remove your crane? And second of all, we kind of like it there. And if you've been out on the new thing, there are actually 4 benches that actually look at that. So it is kind of cool. And you wonder how that graffiti got up there, don't you? You wonder how they actually got it up there. Yeah. No, I agree with you. And we do have there a plaque that is now with the new trail open. It's a little out of position, but it does talk about the power plant. And that power plant in 1902 was the biggest generator of electricity in the United States. So there's real history there.
I walked on the trail for the first time this weekend and it's wonderful. Who's Mr. Lane? And why is there a plaque on the bridge for Mr. Lane?
So Lane Fike was our director of capital projects. He unfortunately died in January. He was trying to hang on to get over the new bridge. So we decided to put a little plaque there. It's only about this big. It's like 4 by 6, right? And it says, I know what it says.
Mr. Lane wanted a
It's a-
beautiful bridge and we built one or
Yeah,
something
it
like
says,
that.
Lane always wanted a fancy bridge and he made it happen. That's what it says. And we said, this is not for the public. This is just for our family and his family. So we put this thing in a spot that nobody would see. It's sort of like tucked away. So we had the donor walk. Do you remember the donor walk where Bob Thomas was in the picture? It was a rainy night. I'm following the donors over. The very first lady who was in the lead over there is leaning over there to get a picture. So I guess we didn't hide it so good. Yeah.
I have another question. I walked the trail a lot. It's challenging to be a walker and a biker on the same path.
It sure is.
Is there any consideration for how to change that?
No, I mean, I don't know if somebody's got a really good idea, let's hear it. I mean, people usually come to us, they want speed limit signs. I mean, all speed limit signs do is a place to put a tag. It'll have a sticker on within thing. I mean, and on the new section, especially because it rises up in both directions, it also drops down in both directions, and you can get going pretty fast on a bike. That's the one complaint that we have gotten a lot of, and I don't know what to do about it, other than if we somehow, in a broader sense, educate people that please don't run people off the road. But you're not wrong, for sure.
Is there any chance that the railroad will be history one day?
Not so far as I know. I mean, we thought a while back that it might not be needed. And then when the refinery closed and they stopped bringing all the Bakken fuel oil down there because they were getting 100-car trains every day in and 100-car trains empty coming out, we thought, well, maybe some of that losing that business would have them close up, but it doesn't appear to be that way. Somebody once told me that railroad, even if they weren't operating, they would keep the railroads never get rid of real estate. Somebody is there saying we might need that 100 years from now. Don't sell it, and that's the way they operate.
Mhm.
And they are, they're really not nice neighbors.
Yeah. Is there any chance that the graffiti could be removed?
The what?
The graffiti is a huge eyesore, in my opinion.
On the train.
not just on the train, everything down. There's so much graffiti on the walls. It just seems as soon as something happens, it's good. The guys or whatever are down there with the cans and they're screwing it up.
So I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm hoping you're talking about on the walls of the building there, like the Pico building and stuff like that, because we're pretty good at getting graffiti off the trail. And folks, by the way, it's 5 days a week, every week, to getting it off. We can take it off with chemicals and we can paint over it. What we don't have is the big, powerful power washer, but we reach out to the city, something called CLIP, Community Life Improvement Project. The problem with CLIP is they've got 11,000 acres of the city to take care of in Fairmount Park and all. So they're not as responsive. But I think the trail is pretty good with regard to graffiti compared to other things.
Oh, Mr. Sarnick, I hope I'm saying your name right. Over here.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh, hi there. Sorry about that. I'm in the cheap seats. First, thank you for a very informative and highly entertaining presentation. And if you haven't done it already, you might want to think about stand-up comedy because you're pretty funny. I think that the plan currently is to connect the Schuylkill River Trail with the Delaware River Trail, roughly 2029. When that happens, how many miles will we be able to travel on the combined two trails before you come to a dead end?
So I don't know the answer. I don't know enough about the Delaware Trail and what's completed and what's not. But when that swing bridge is finished, and we're hoping by the end of this calendar year, right? You can get from 61st Street or opposite 61st Street, almost to Valley Forge, 99.9% on trail. There's two sections, one in Manayunk and one a little further up where you have to come out in the street, but they're very short sections. So that's 40 miles of trail. That's pretty good. Yeah.
Joe, it's Patrick Starr.
Yeah.
Hey there.
Hi, Patrick.
When you took this job, having left the streets department, having been in charge of the bridge unit, did you think you were going to build all these bridges at the Schuylkill River Development Corporation?
No, and you know what though? But I did know, what I did know is that I didn't know enough about structural engineering, because even though I might have been the head of that, I was really a highway guy. And I hired Lane because Lane was in the bridge division.
I knew he was bridges.
Yeah,
right.
and you know, Lane was he was a good engineer, but he's also kind of like I'm going to call it a deep thinker, and I mean that in the nicest way. He was always sending me pictures of bridges in like Indonesia or London or something like that that were, you know, spectacular. And he was saying, well, can't we have one of these here? And I say, Lane, you know, it's form follows function, right? You have to need that swirly thing there. You can't just put it in. But he was very happy with this. I'm really sorry he didn't hang on for another 5 months. But I think, by the way, I think he was there on May 17th. I'm pretty sure he was there. Yeah.
Hey, Joe. Yeah, so when I was at the city, we pushed at Otis, we pushed very hard for Hillco to build a waterfront trail on their entire bank of the property. And I think there's an easement now to build the trail, but how do you think that it will seamlessly connect to Schuylkill Banks and all that? Oh, sorry, no. So I think the city got Hillco to build the trail on their own side of the own side of the bank now. And so will that connect? Do you know what the limits of that are or anything?
I don't know a lot about it. My understanding is that on the east side of the river, where Hillco is building most of their development, they're going to make it like an industrial park with nice plantings and bike lanes. I don't believe most of that is done yet, but I think they intend to do it because they want to make it, you know, look like a suburban park. We are not getting a lot of cooperation with Hillco on the one property that we need. And they actually offered it to us in the city for $10, so basically free. But they also said you would be taking on the cleanup responsibilities for it, the remediation, which could be millions. But you don't really know if it's millions until you go in there and do a soil characterization, find out what's down there and what would it take to solve that. And they're saying, well, you can't do any testing. So you've got to come in. They'll give us $10. We'll take on all these responsibilities. And then afterwards, we will figure out what it takes, or the city probably more likely, what it takes to clean it up. Who's going to take that deal? You know? So, and I don't get that they're not using it. It's land that they're not using. They're having fights with the neighbors down there. I mean, the neighbors are looking for Hilco to, you know, step up and do certain things that they want. There's talk of a benefits agreement. This seems like an easy one to just say, look, we'll dedicate this land. We'll pay for the land. We'll pay for the land. That's not the issue. They should dedicate it, but we'll pay for it. Just let us come in and build a trail there. But to do that, we have to do testing to see what's there. It's tough. We'll see. These, you know, somebody says it's negotiations, you know. So we'll see how it works. But over on their side of the river, where they're mainly issue, I think they're doing the right thing.
Hi, Joe. It's Danielle over here.
Yes, hi, Dave.
Hi. I have two questions. First, who are the engineers for the new Crescent Bridge?
So it was AECom, which is a big national or international company, like 200 people. They manage it out of their Philadelphia office. Where we can, we go local. But the main span was actually really designed by their office, their long span division out of Tampa, Florida. So Florida has a lot of water. They have a lot of these kinds of bridges, and they were fabulous. There wasn't one question we ever asked them, and we didn't know a lot about this, you know. But we knew to ask questions. There wasn't one question we ever asked them that they didn't have the answer right away, and the answer made perfect sense. You think, oh, you know, why didn't we think of that? But they were really good. And I also say the contractor. Remember, did I tell you the prices? I told you the prices, right? The bid prices. So the engineer's estimate for the whole job was $43 million. That's what you're shooting for. The low bid was $45 million. The second bid was $60 million, $15 million higher. There were 8 bids total that went to $88 million. So when that happened, and Lane was in the office, he's going online. They bid it through PennDOT. It comes up online. He goes, "Hey, we got a bid for $45 million." Which is close to 43. Good. And then he goes, "Uh-oh." So we thought for sure that they were going to throw it in. They don't have to move forward on that. They said we made a mistake because they left $15 million on the table. I picked up the phone. I called the president of the company. I said, "Congratulations on your great bid. What are you going to do?" And he said, "Look, we in the last half hour since it's been you're called, we've gone over all our numbers. We don't think we made a mistake. I'm not going to lie to you." He said, "I wish we had bid $14 million higher, but we're going to move forward." And they were fabulous, totally non-union, pay their guys great, out of Newtown, Pennsylvania. Some of you know I worked for the streets department for 35 years and now 20 years here. We never used them before, didn't really know much about them. Fabulous, absolutely fabulous. Everything we said to them, they were 2 steps ahead of us. And some of it was simple stuff, like you go to them and say, "Don't forget, we got those benches ordered, and there's like a 16-week, you know, lead time on those benches. You know, get those benches." Joe, the benches are in our shed. You know, just like who are you talking to? You know, just leave us alone.
What was the name of that contractor?
Huh?
What was the name of the contractor?
PKF Mark III. Everybody just calls them PKF.
Okay.
And they were, I mean, they've been around. They were a joint venture on the Scudder's Falls project up by Trenton, which was like a $440 million project. And it was too big for 2 big contractors, so they joined together. So they've done big work before. That's why we never used them. The projects we have are just too small for these guys.
Right. And then I have a question about the potential of taking the trail all the way to Fort Mifflin, because I remember from 20 years ago when I was working with you on this, and also as part of the Lower Schuylkill Master Plan, the vision, right, was that perhaps the trail could actually go even farther south of Passyunk Avenue and go to Fort Mifflin. What you're dealing with Hilco and the general public, do you see that as being something that can happen?
It's still the plan. I mean, that's still the plan. It gets tougher down there because there's a lot of active industry there, including Vane Brothers tugboats. You know, they're not going to want to trail along the river. They operate tugboats, but we're just going to try to snake it through there. But, you know, if somebody came up to us today, Elon Musk come up to us today and said, "Look, here's, I don't know, $2 billion, build that trail down to Fort Mifflin as fast as you can. You might not want to build that trail as fast as you can because you're taking it down into very isolated areas. The idea is to have that trail drag development with and people with it. So if you had a trail down there, it might be very lonely if you were out there jogging by yourself. So it's not all about the money, but I would take the 2 million from Elon if he billion, 2 billion.
It looked like there were quite a few workers out there. Was there any issue getting enough labor with the right skills to get the job done?
So they're fabulous. They had everything. All their guys were great, and again, big contractor was just one we had never used before. But they all had their own thing. They're non-union, but a lot of non-union contractors do. They do a bunch of different skills. They have different work rules. I would say these guys pretty much operated in a lot of ways like a union contract. So the carpenter did the carpentry work, the rod setter did the rod setter, the cement finisher did the cement finisher. I'm telling you, any other project that we ever get, we're going to try to get them to bid on it. From who? So the question is, did we get any pushbacks from unions? There's plenty, so much work out there. They're not bothering fighting that. If work were tight, you'd see the big rat out there, I'm pretty sure. But there was absolutely none of that at all. And of course, by the way, the non-union contractor, they have to pay prevailing wage, just so you know. They can't just pay their guys less. There's a certain prevailing wage, which more or less corresponds to the union rate. So the playing field is as level as it can be. Yeah.
I have a question. You mentioned that the tide goes up 5 or 6 feet every day.
Mm-hmm.
How did that hinder construction, or did that hinder construction at all?
Well, yeah. I mean, so when they would bring a barge up to their unloading spot, they could be down a couple feet or up a couple feet. And in some cases, they had to time their work to coincide with high tide or low tide or mid tide, whatever they needed it to be. And a lot of days they start at work at 3 o'clock in the morning to make that. And some days they started at 11 o'clock in the morning to make that work. So it complicates everything, but it also is like, it's not like there's tides a lot of places. So it's not like I'm putting a man on the moon, but you do have to do, going back to Vane Brothers, if I can, the tugboat people, when we were trying to build the swing bridge and we were trying to lift it up and put it there, fixed, not a movable bridge, it was 35 feet clearance to get in there. And Vane Brothers were the only big operator there. And we went to them and said, can you get through at 35 feet? And the guy says, well, I think most of the time we can. He says, but you know what? I don't really care. I don't really care. It's not that much business. Put it any dimension you want. I don't really care. So when we put it at 35 feet. And once you list that, you have to advertise in the paper and saying, we're making a change here that's going to affect navigation. If you have a complaint, write to the Coast Guard. If you're putting this ad in the paper for the Coast Guard. Vane Brothers sent in 7 complaints, 1 for each boat. So this is they didn't care. They thought they could do it. They didn't care. But at one time, the reason I started to tell you this story, the guy said to us, if we did that, we might have to only be able to get under that bridge at low tide, and therefore we would have to time when we came up. And we said, well, yeah, you would, but I mean, if that's the worst thing that you got to do all the time, I think you got a great company, pal, But yeah, we'd have to time it to be there right at low tide.
Hey, I have a question over here.
Yes, yes.
I'm wondering about the community engagement process that happens with a project at this scale. And if you had any specific pushback, like from the Grays Ferry area where you were opening up the trail to the larger network. And then also like who fields the community pushback and deals with that.
So first, we had that master plan for 2003. That's our blueprint. So and that was extensive community participation, but it's 20 years ago. we've always, everywhere we go, like here stuff, we've always promoted what our plan is. And the plan, by the way, really follows very closely that master plan. Most people want that trail there. They want more traffic on the trail. I'm sure there's a couple people down in Grace Ferry who probably feel like I'm losing my private little enclave there. But I'm telling you, I was on the riverboat last Sunday and I'm going up there and there were a whole slew of bicycles on that lower Grace Ferry Crescent section. And there was a whole bunch of picnickers there. I'm pretty sure the picnickers were neighbors that were always there, but the bicycles, I'm pretty sure were new. And again, I don't think it hurts them. And we really didn't get much pushback. We would have been the ones handling it, but there really wasn't much.
Well, this has been awfully inspiring. So please join me again. Thank you, Joe.